It would be good to have only good news on the Hungarian economy. Unfortunately, not everything is shining, as probably you see on the street, because the last 4 years.
Today's story is about power, pressure, and one man who keeps challenging Brussels again and again. Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orbán. Right now, the European Union is facing one of its most tense internal moments in years. At the centre of it all is a decision that shocked many capitals. The EU has agreed to indefinitely freeze around €210 billion worth of Russian state assets. Officially, this move is meant to ensure Russia cannot access this money until it ends the war in Ukraine and pays for the damage. Unofficially, this decision also blocks Hungary from using its veto power to stop future EU support for Ukraine. Viktor Orbán reacted immediately. He called the decision unlawful, dangerous, and a direct violation of European legal principles. In his words, Brussels has crossed a red line. Orbán argues that if the EU can freeze Russian assets today, it could freeze the assets of any country tomorrow. This message was not only meant for lawyers in Brussels, but for Hungarian voters at home. Orbán has built his political brand on one central idea. Hungary must not be told what to do by Brussels. Whether the issue is migration, media laws, LGBTQ policies, or foreign affairs, Orbán frames every conflict as a battle for national sovereignty. And once again, this strategy is clearly visible. The conflict between Hungary and the EU did not start with Ukraine. It has been building for more than a decade. The European Parliament has repeatedly accused Orbán's government of weakening democratic institutions, controlling the media, and undermining judicial independence. Some members of the European Parliament now openly describe Hungary as an electoral autocracy rather than a full democracy. Brussels has responded with legal action, freezing EU funds and restarting Article 7 procedures that could, in theory, suspend Hungary's voting rights inside the EU. Orbán, however, has shown that he is not easily intimidated. Instead of backing down, he has doubled down. Ukraine is where this conflict becomes explosive. Most EU leaders see support for Kyiv as a moral and strategic necessity. Orbán does not. He argues that the war cannot be won on the battlefield, and that Europe is damaging its own economy by continuing sanctions and military aid. He warns that deeper involvement could drag the EU into a wider conflict. This position puts Hungary almost alone inside the bloc. Countries on the eastern flank, especially Poland, the Baltic states, and Finland, believe the opposite. They argue that weakness invites aggression and that Europe must show strength against Russia. These divisions have forced the EU to search for creative legal solutions to move forward without unanimous agreement. That is exactly what happened with the Russian asset freeze. By locking in the decision at an institutional level, Brussels reduced Hungary's ability to block future moves. Orbán sees this as an attack on the EU's own rules. Brussels sees it as necessary damage control. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has also added pressure. He has publicly urged Hungary to stop blocking Ukraine's path toward EU membership. For Orbán, this is another sensitive issue. He argues that Ukraine is not ready to join and that fast-tracking its accession would destabilize the EU. Behind all of this is domestic politics. Hungary is heading toward parliamentary elections in 2026. Orbán's messaging is clearly designed for that audience. He presents himself as the defender of Hungarian identity against foreign pressure. Brussels, in his narrative, represents liberal elites disconnected from ordinary people. This narrative is reinforced by cultural battles at home. Hungary's government has taken a hard line against LGBTQ events, including pride marches. Activists have faced legal consequences, and teachers and organisers have been targeted. Human rights groups say these moves violate fundamental EU values. Orbán says he is protecting children and traditional families. At the same time, Hungary is paying a financial price. Billions of euros in EU development funds remain frozen because of rule of law concerns. This affects infrastructure, public services, and long-term investment. Orbán has responded by threatening to veto future EU budgets unless Hungary receives its money. This standoff is creating frustration inside the EU. Some leaders now openly argue that the bloc must be tougher with Hungary. Others fear that pushing too hard could split the union at a time when unity is already under strain due to war, economic pressure, and geopolitical uncertainty. There is also a wider international context. Changes in US politics have made European leaders nervous. Orbán has suggested that Europe may need a new strategy on Ukraine if American support weakens. He sees an opportunity to reshape EU policy if Washington steps back. This makes Orban both a problem and a wild card for Brussels. He slows down decisions, forces legal workarounds, and exposes the limits of EU consensus. But he also reflects a deeper question facing Europe. How much diversity of political systems can the EU tolerate while still claiming to be a union of shared values? As we move into the next year, several things will matter. Whether the EU continues to bypass Hungary using legal mechanisms, whether frozen funds become a bargaining chip, whether Orban softens his stance under economic pressure, and whether Hungarian voters continue to reward his confrontational approach. One thing is clear, Viktor Orbán is not backing down. He is betting that resistance works, that Brussels needs Hungary more than Hungary needs Brussels, and that voters prefer a leader who fights external pressure. For the European Union, this is a stress test. It must prove that it can defend its principles without tearing itself apart. The outcome of this struggle will shape not only EU policy on Ukraine, but the future of European integration itself. If you want more deep, factual breakdowns like this, make sure you subscribe to EU Politics. Let us know in the comments what you think. Is Orban defending sovereignty or is he undermining European unity? This debate is far from over. Stay informed and we'll see you in the next video. And this debate is no longer limited to Hungary alone. What worries many European leaders now is precedent. If Viktor Orbán succeeds in consistently blocking or reshaping EU decisions without serious consequences, other governments may follow the same path. That could fundamentally change how the European Union functions. Instead of a bloc that moves together, it could become a loose collection of states constantly negotiating exceptions. Inside Brussels, there is already quiet discussion about reforming EU decision-making rules. Some officials argue that foreign policy and sanctions should no longer require unanimous approval. Others warn that removing veto power could deepen mistrust between smaller states and larger powers like Germany and France. Orban is fully aware of this tension and uses it to his advantage. Meanwhile, Hungarian society itself is becoming more polarized. Urban voters, young people, and independent media voices increasingly criticize Orban's confrontational approach, arguing that isolation from the EU harms Hungary's future. Rural areas and older voters, however, often support his message of national control and cultural protection. This internal divide mirrors the wider European split between integration and sovereignty. Another factor to watch is the economy. Inflation, energy prices, and access to EU funds will play a major role in shaping public opinion inside Hungary. If economic pressure increases, Orban may face limits to how far he can push Brussels without consequences at home. If conditions stabilize, his confidence will only grow. For the EU, the challenge is timing. Push too hard, and Orban becomes a martyr in his own narrative. Move too slowly, and the credibility of EU values erodes. This balance will define European politics over the next year. One thing is certain. Viktor Orbán has become more than a national leader. He is now a symbol of resistance to the EU's current direction, whether people see that as courageous or dangerous. And as long as the war in Ukraine continues and global politics remain unstable, his influence inside European debates will not disappear. This story is still unfolding, and every new EU summit brings fresh tension, new compromises, and new conflicts. Stay with us as we continue to track how this power struggle shapes Europe's future. There is also a growing fear inside Brussels that time is working in Orban's favour. Every delay normalises obstruction. Every workaround weakens the idea that the EU speaks with one voice. Even when Hungary is bypassed legally, the political damage remains. Citizens across Europe are starting to ask whether the EU is still capable of decisive leadership in moments of crisis. At the same time, Orban is carefully positioning himself on the international stage. He presents Hungary as a bridge between East and West, someone who can talk to Moscow while remaining inside the EU. Critics say this strategy benefits the Kremlin more than Europe. Supporters argue it keeps diplomatic channels open when others have failed. What makes this situation especially complex is that Orban does not need to win every battle. He only needs to slow things down, raise costs, and force compromises. In EU politics, delay itself is power, and Orban understands this better than most leaders in Europe today. As new sanctions, aid packages and security plans are discussed, the same question keeps returning. Can the European Union remain united while allowing one member state to consistently challenge its core direction? The answer to that question will not come from one summit or one vote. It will come from how far both sides are willing to go.